but completely incoherent in terms of the activity you have here. This field, ugly as it looks, this last April was still in grass, and we'd had such a shock from the spring. We thought, and we'd eaten so much of our silage ground already by the beginning of May, we thought we should get in some, hopefully, arable silage. We ploughed this and we put in a crop of oats and vetch, which from memory might just about have had about 2 mils of rain between it, between sowing it and cutting it. But we'd done the nasty bit, which is a ploughing, and presumably released a bunch of carbon while we were doing it. But having done that, it was very, very simple just to rake it over and put in some, throw in some forage rape seed, which is now returning. If we hadn't done that little crop of forage rape, we'd have had to sold all the cows about the middle of December, I should think, because we were out. But with this, just them coming on here for a couple of hours every day, just kept them going through the winter and just about producing milk, so that was good. Now we have, hard to tell, but we have actually sown some barley in here. There's a little bit, suffering severely from rabbit and one or two other things, no doubt. But the plan, regardless of whether the barley was a great success or not, would be to direct drill in some red clover and ryegrass later on as well. So from the one ploughing, we're going to get 3 hits and maybe 4 hits without ploughing again, and then eventually return it back to a herbal lay, either next year or the year after, depending if we get any of the ryegrass to take or not. So if you'd asked me 2 years ago, are you ever going to grow any forage crops for the winter, I'd have said no, don't be so stupid. But that drought last year, for me as a livestock farmer, was very, very frightening, and we had to do something, and it kind of worked. It worked enough to make us want to do more. So we've put in a field of forage rye just over the hill here, which is going to get raked over. Next time we graze it, it'll get raked over, and then crimson clover put in there, and hope to get 1 or 2 cuts of silage off that. And then another field over there with some cows eating a bale of straw at the moment. That one will also get ploughed up this year for I think stubble turnips in there initially, and then go through a similar kind of process to this. We are very interested in the work that Gabe Brown is doing in the USA. I don't know if you've heard of Gabe Brown. He's written this very interesting book called From Dirt to Soil, and it's his journey. Lupo has actually been out to his place and seen it. It's a journey from a guy who was a commodity crop grower and gently sliding down the pan to realizing he had to do something a little bit different, which he came across almost by accident, but with cover crops and direct drilling, and introducing livestock, or growing his livestock numbers on a farm. And he's still a pretty serious commodity crop grower, but everything within, rather than just growing soya and wheat, he now grows an awful lot of cover crops to feed cattle at critical times of the year. And he is very seriously into diversity. It's a word we heard earlier from Katie, and he considers a sensible cover crop, if it hasn't got at least 8 species in it, it's not really worth doing. So we're looking at ways that we might be able to do that here as well, and we have very, very different climatic conditions, of course, and I don't think it's easy in Cornwall to be on a no-till basis. Minimum till a little bit maybe, but just looking at the way that the barley hasn't, I'm not convinced yet. But we've got to do something where we can learn to live without ploughing frequently, in my view. So that's the situation here. I'm really amazed at how how resilient the forage rape has been. I don't know if anyone has got much experience with that crop, but to me it seems to be, you know, it's really hanging in there, and we shall graze this directly, no doubt.
Chris, talking about resilience, I thought you were going to say daffodils. How long is it since you had bulbs in here, and does the fact that these volunteers...
2001, but it's only been ploughed, I think, twice since then.
Yeah. Does the foliage have any impact on forage, or are they? I don't know.
Haven't noticed anything. Nothing has dropped. Well, nothing's dropped dead because of it. I mean, I don't see the animals particularly seeking to graze it when it's here. But if it ends up cutting a bale of silage, it doesn't seem to get spat out either. But there's not that much of it in reality. I think you'd have to gather up an awful lot to kill a cow. I hope.
From a few buttercups, is it?
Probably not.
Did you used to grow daffodils then? Why
No, we had this thing when I went away to work in the oil field in the late 90s. We rented the farm out to Flora for 3 seasons, and I was just explaining earlier, it was the biggest mistake of my life. Terrible. We've got a field up here we call Otie's Gully, because the gully that Mr. Jeremy Otie left behind was so severe. It took us about 3. That one did get ploughed a lot. It took us about 3 goes at cultivating it out. It's gone now, but commemorated in the field name.
were they growing daffodils then?
They were growing daffodils, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Has someone got any more questions at this point?
Yeah, I have. So you're trying different herbal lays and things. Do you actually make a note of what in those lays just doesn't persist? You know, you've got some things they'll just turn up for a season, and then the other things come
you
back
bet.
they love it.
You bet.
Other things don't. It's worth noting so you know.
Yeah. There's
What doesn't like it here?
or what don't I like here? Maybe another. There's a gentleman called Lady who farmed near Hale kind of area in the earlier part of the 20th century, and he wrote a wonderful book called Profitable Lay Farming, and it is really, really, really worth reading, because if we'd read that, I think I got hold of it in 2010 or 11, and it says these grasses are really good, these plants are really good, these legumes are really good, and then he'll list all the ones which are just not really worth trying with. And funnily enough, all the ones that weren't worth trying with were ones we put in and disappeared after 1 or 2 seasons. So
He had it right.
He had it right, yeah. There's not much that we can't pick up from old knowledge, really.
Right,
There's I mean, there's some things, I guess, but there's probably not much.
What grandfather did is probably what we need to be looking at, isn't it?
I was just commenting to Lupo just now that we've got this phenomenon these days of the seagull-less spring cultivations and autumn cultivations. The seagulls just not following ploughs on some farms because there's just nothing there for them to eat. They've just been that hammered. Right, so if no one's got anything, any burning questions or observations or advice would be good actually about what.
Some sheep to graze this off.
Yeah.
Is he going to give me a dark look now?
No. I think sheep have got a job to do. Anything else?
The barley was to try and get less bare earth.
Yeah, just wanted to get something growing on here, and 6 weeks ago it was actually looking quite good.
You're trying to make sure there's cover.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, yeah.
And if you want to build up your carbon levels, even if you're not ploughing it in or spreading muck or something, at least if you've got green cover, there's carbon coming from directly from sunlight, getting it back down in the soil by various means. So it's one way of building up your organic carbon. By having lots of cover on the top.
The barley is here. You can see
It is just not very much of it at all now. So we live and we learn, and who knows? You might do another February and it might be fine.
I mean, there are drought-resistant lays you could try, and then you wouldn't have to plough and release all that carbon from the soil, and you wouldn't have bare soils. And like, why are you going down the crop route rather than trying to keep a grass cover?
We wanted something that's going to grow a bit faster, frankly, because we'd just grazed off all of our silage, first cut silage, and if we carried on like that, we'd have just had nothing for the cows by the middle of winter. There might be a cleverer way of doing it. I don't know.
How big a herd have you got?
There's 80 hybrid cows, mostly sort of Jersey, Frisian, Ayrshire cross kind of thing. We might see some across the other side of the farm, directly.
And how many acres?
Of grass, effectively 140, give or take 1 or 2. So it's enough, but it's very, very different from the beef cattle we had here. The beef herd was a bit smaller, and I was used to putting them into a field when the grass was knee deep. During the sort of the May, June, July time. It's a very different ball game. My nephew Colin, who's lurking around somewhere, he looks after all that side of it. Needless to say, there are artistic tensions, but I've got to, it's his gig, so I need to give him the space to do things. And I think, we're trying some interesting things, and we kind of scraped through last year. I would imagine that if we had another drought like last year, there will be farms going out of business. I imagine. I don't know if anyone would agree with that or not, but it was pretty bloody severe. I was speaking to a chap in Devon at a soil event a couple of months ago, and he said he might be one of them if we had that again.
Argue, Chris, that actually we're not out of that drought yet.
No, quite. No, we're not really. No.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess rotational grazing is the other way to get more from the acres.
Well, that is sort of what we do. So you'll see that in a minute, and we've been doing that for a few years now. So I'd say we've got a reasonable experience. I'm not going to mention the H word because I'm not sure, we don't follow that religiously. But the cows move every day, and the milkers move twice a day. So it is happening. And judging by the soil thing we've been doing with Becky this year, and looking back what we were doing 10 years ago, we are adding about 0.5% of soil organic matter every year to the soil. What we don't know, because we never did it, we never dug any pits and actually measured how deep the topsoil is, but I can tell you there is more topsoil there now than there was then, without shadow of a doubt. But I can't say it's 11 millimeters more or something, but it's that kind of number. Do you want to dig a hole, Lup? Are you sure? Are you sure?
I've seen the stones and I've got my spade.
Okay, right, let's go on to the next one, and we'll talk about history.